Hey everyone, Eric Hayden here in the garden. I hope you enjoyed the last couple of videos. We covered a lot: alfalfa tea, liquid fertilizer, gave you an update on the roses after the hard freeze we have. Want to show you some cool stuff behind me, kind of a little tour of the garden as of late April. No roses yet. Our usual bloom is May 5th to about May 20th, so we're still many weeks away. And with a hard freeze at the beginning of April, probably not until the middle to latter part of May that we'll have rose blooms. But if you saw the last video, one of the projects we've been working on is mulching. So we used the brown mulch that had a dye to it. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the dyed mulch, but it is looking pretty good. I want to show you some of the azaleas that we have since they're in bloom. I'm no azalea expert, so I actually have the tags with me, so I make sure I get it right. These that I'm showing you are Encore azaleas, Autumn Royalty, and the other one is Autumn Splendor. You can get these at any of the big box stores. Also, your local garden shop should have it. The big advantage of these, we all know that azaleas usually bloom in the spring and they're quite prolific, but you can see right here on the tag itself, it talks about little maintenance, and it's a good plant. And dark peak blooms on this particular one, and on the other one it's purple. But the real selling point to these is right here with blooms in spring, summer, and fall. So kind of a neat feature. This one is a pink one, so very nice. These are intermediate ones, so these azaleas will eventually get 4.5 by 4.5 feet wide by 4.5 feet tall. Here's more of a pink one. These blooms are faded a little bit, so you can see that. But you can see they're pretty compact plants. This one over here is interesting. It's a pink one, so this is probably the Autumn Sangria. Again, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I'm no expert on those, but just really nice blooms. And again, no expert here, but I know a different bloom when I see it. You can clearly see these are pink, and these are white with a little bit of pink. So I don't know if we have a little sport going on or if they do that a lot. If you grow Encore azaleas, comment below. I'm just kind of curious, do you often get multicolored blooms on a bush? If you're growing these, I've grown them for, I guess, a year and a half now. Two things I've noticed: they're supposed to be 4.5 feet tall by 4.5 feet wide, and they're about half that now. So we'll see what happens in the coming years, but they're not quite getting as big as I thought they were. They certainly aren't as big as a traditional azalea. This is a climbing rose. This is Dublin Bay. You can see that we are just now starting to get some new growth. These are probably a month away from blooming for the most part. However, there are some buds on them. So this climbing rose is probably one of the first ones that will bloom in the garden. This is Dublin Bay, a really nice climbing rose. If you've seen a couple weeks ago, these look terrible, but they're looking better now. These are Canna Lilies, really nice. They'll get quite tall and have some red flowers on them. Again, these are more Encore azaleas, either the Autumn Sangria or the other one, Autumn Royalty. Just a really pretty bloom. So if you're looking for azaleas that bloom multiple times a year, you live in a climate that has azaleas, I would consider them. Just note that they may not get quite as big as the label says. At least that's been my experience so far. They have been in for a year and a half, some of them. So really nice one. So just wanted to give you a tour of what was actually blooming. This is a black diamond Crepe Myrtle that's just starting to leaf out. Again, you will have noticed that the mulch here is all pine straw. It's a wide area. I don't want to pay to bag mulch that. It would take a long time as well. Quick tour on the roses. You can see the mulch is looking really good. I'll identify some of the roses as I go by. The one in the back, the One Cane Wonder, is Moonstone. Got that from Witherspoon last year. I may be digging that up. It's just not doing that well, and I'm going to put a replacement there. This is Crescendo. This here is Claire Elise. Dublin. It's an older rose, but a really nice one. Has a pretty big bloom on it. This is the first of 2 Let Freedom rings I have. And if you click, I'll try to put it in the link below. This is Louise Estes, And if you've been a fan of my page for a while, this is a maiden rose that was planted a couple years ago, and you can't tell now. A maiden rose is a little baby rose grafted onto multiflora rootstock from Steve Singer at Wisconsin Roses. And it's pretty neat. It comes in the mail. It's real small. The bud eye is grafted onto the side of the multiflora. You take the multiflora off. You have 3 big canes by about midsummer, and certainly by fall it's a grade 1 rose. But the advantage is you're not moving it around. You know, when you order bare root, they're chopped up a little bit for shipping. You know, they're cut down, stripped of leaves. But I don't know if you can tell, but here's my finger, and that's the cane. They're not a baseball bat, but they are big canes. Now, Louise Estes is a good growing rose, and you can see a lot of this new growth. It is starting to look really good. This garden here is Mr. Caleb. That's a hybrid tea. All these are hybrid teas. Baby's Blush, not looking that good. That may get the heave-ho. This is one is Marilyn Monroe. I'm going to do an upcoming video on tags. Do you label your roses? I'm kind of curious. What types of labels are out there. Those are the kind I use. This is Cajun Moon. It's a nice white with a little bit of pink. This is a newer one, a Ring of Fire, beautiful orange roses that I'll show you once it's in bloom, and that's Silver Cream. Back here is more of a fragrance garden. Not every one is a fragrant one. If you saw the video of the rose that was almost dead, it's still kicking. I'm still probably going to dig it up, but you can see some of the bud eyes are producing. That's Melania. It's a Fred Wright rose. This one here is either Moonstone or Gemini, and that's either Moonstone or Gemini. I got one of each from Palatine. Those are the potted roses we potted in December. I mentioned this is mainly a fragrance garden. This is Fragrant Cloud, an orange rose that's very, very fragrant. Back here are 2 neat roses. The one on the left is European Touch. Its own root from my dad's garden. I had the original bush in New York, won 3rd place. I won 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in the Rose National Show in fall of 2015. Took it back to his garden, got a cutting, and I have an own root European Touch, which is the sport of Folklore. This is the original one. It actually reverted back on a stem. I rooted that. Now I have Folklore. So Folklore is an orange rose. It's a Cordis rose from the 70s and early 80s. Very, very hardy. Had 0 damage. We got down to 24, and unlike the other roses, you can't find any damage on these because they're bred for colder climates. European Touch is more of an apricot, but same growth pattern because a sport is just difference usually in color. This is Secret, a nice light pink fragrant rose. This is one that was looking bad a couple weeks ago. Look at all the new purple growth. And remember the last video I showed you some of those shoots, and look at them kicking out. That alfalfa tea is doing its job. So these are rocking and rolling. If you see this residue on the leaves, that's manzate. It's a contact killer for black spot. It's also a protection for the rose to keep it from getting black spot. This is Pope John Paul II, a white fragrant rose as well. This garden was the last to get pruned. This is Dolly Parton. That is on multiflora from Palatine Roses. This is Double Delight. One of my favorite roses by far is this. If you want a red rose that's fragrant, it's Mr. Lincoln. Outstanding. Don't worry, it'll leaf out here in a couple weeks. 2 that I did not prune, Alina. It's one of the more disease-resistant roses you can get. Does it still get black spot? Yes. But look how hardy it's looking. And then the one that will bloom the first in my garden, if not the climbing rose, it's this one, Yolande De Aragon. I am not an old garden rose fan. However, my son likes this rose, and it's hard to argue with your kids. These are pink blooms. They are poofy looking is how I would describe them, not the classic hybrid tea form, but they are, you cannot beat the smell. Mr. Lincoln, Double Delight, all great hybrid teas, but an old garden English rose smell really, really hard to beat. Here's one of my friends in the garden, the good old ladybug. Again, we've got a lot of them this year, which is good for the garden. But those are blooms that should be out here pretty soon. So we're going to kind of have a wide season this year because of that freeze. Bushes that were not impacted, and those two in particular I did not prune. So we'll continue with the tour. This is one of the newest beds. This is why everything is smaller. This is an own root Sheila's Perfume. This is an own root Eddie Edwards. What that means is it's not grafted onto anything. Either I took a cutting and did an own root, or I was given one. This is Cajun Moon. This is a Steve Singer rose from last year. Not a Steve Singer rose, but he does the grafted maidens on Multiflora. So again, we got this in spring of 2020, potted it up, let it grow. I think I've got my dates right. And then by the following year, you can see, you have a very healthy rose. So if you're into hybrid teas, I'll put the link in the description. He sells ones like Affirm, Cajun Moon, Louise Estes, things like that. Maverick, that's another one from him. This is another Louise Estes, also from him. So this garden, these three on Multiflora, those two are on own root, and the last one, Signature, is on Fortuniana. That's the one that most of my roses are on. So the last two beds were the first two beds that I planted. This is spring of 2017, Let Freedom Ring. It took a whooping with the winter kill. So again, pardon how bad some of these leaves look. This is not spray burn. This is not fertilizer burn. This is from the freeze we had. However, look at the new growth. And what's really exciting, coming from near the bud union, we've got some new growth. Affirm, again, you can see the devastation that the freeze did. However, look at all the promise of the purple growth. And in fact, I want to draw your attention to these. This is not just leaves. These are long canes. Look at that. I mean, those are your florist type of stems. 18 inches long and a bud on the end. So we're going to be rocking and rolling here in a couple weeks. Crystalline, older rose, used in the florist trade. It's white, has a slight fragrance to it for some. Marlin's Day, one of my better roses. It's a sport of moonstone. I had a moonstone that unfortunately died in Hurricane Florence. So right now Marlin's Day is probably my best one. Jewel Grace, that's the only rose I moved down from New York. Was going to give it to a friend, but that didn't work out, so it ended up in my car, and it's in North Carolina. This is Zach Noble's. It's an orangish, reddish rose. It's a sport of Let Freedom Ring. Last bed, which was planted, this was planted first, this was planted second, but also spring of 2017. That's why these are so big. My wife was teasing me, this is after pruning hard in the early spring. So they are already 4.5 feet tall. This is Gemini. This is Hot Princess. Again, if you look, you say, wow, Eric, your leaves look terrible. That is frost damage, but look at all the purple growth, and look down here. Can you see it? This huge cane. Let's see if I can get below everything. Boom. Look at this. Lower in the bush. Remember we said they're more dormant, but once they get going, that's a huge cane with a bud on the end. So starting to look pretty good in the garden. This is a second crescendo I have, also on Fortuniana. All this is on Fortuniana. This is where I had my moonstone that got messed up in Hurricane Florence. So now it's Sunny Sundays. One of my original roses, Veterans Honor. And then the last one, Randy Scott. Incidentally, again, I just can't get over how bad some of these leaves look because of the frost. We'll get rid of those here shortly once the new growth takes over. If you want a red rose, I cannot recommend Veterans Honor more. It doesn't have a fragrance, but it has a very long vase life. So you cut that rose and it's going to be lasting a long, long time. Veterans Honor, my favorite red rose, if you're not looking for fragrance. So I know we're approaching the 15-minute mark. Hopefully you're still with me. That's how the mulch looks. That's a garden tour in late April. We'll do another one here in a couple weeks, or whenever Yolande blooms in the back. And we'll continue to do this spring. I think it's the most requested thing we've gotten, is doing tours of the garden. And obviously they will look better once they get blooms. If you're wondering at home, why does this area look so terrible? It's always been weeds. So I sprayed Roundup a couple times and killed all the weeds. And if I have enough energy with the kids and the roses and work, my goal is to put down fresh sod. So that will look really good as a backdrop. It is now raining. We could certainly use the rain, so I'm gonna wrap up this video. Comment below, what'd you think of the tour? How'd you like the azaleas? And I mentioned tags. We're gonna do a video upcoming. This is what we use for our tags. Very, very small and close to the ground, but it works. What do you use to label your garden? And if you do label it, comment below what you use to do so. Have a great one.